Whoever comes to me and doesn't hate father and mother, spouse and children, and brothers and sisters, yes, even one's own life, cannot be my disciple. Whoever doesn't carry one's own cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. If one of you wanted to build a tower, wouldn't you first sit down and calculate the cost to determine whether you have enough money to complete it? Otherwise, when you have laid the foundation but couldn't finish the tower, all who see it will begin to belittle you. They will say, "Here's the person who began construction and couldn't complete it." Or what king would go to war against another king without first sitting down to consider whether his 10,000 soldiers could go up against the 20,000 coming against him? And if he didn't think he could win, he would send a representative to discuss terms of peace, while his enemy was still a long way off. In the same way, none of you who are unwilling to give up all your possessions can be my disciple. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Did I ever head off in preparation for ministry and try to say no? You shake your head, Dan, but you don't know. Verdi, how many times did I try to tell you no when you kept saying, I have this church? And I kept saying, no, I don't think that's right. My whole story, in fact, I wasn't even off to study yet, and I was already saying no. Spent my entire college career going, nuh-uh. 9 years ago at my ordination, the text that I chose and that was preached on was Jesus entering the synagogue in Nazareth and opening the Isaiah scroll and reading from it. And it's talking about his call story. But truth be told, I should have used Jonah. Because Jonah is a better fit for my story. Because I felt the call, but I was heading to college and I wanted nothing to do with it at the time. So yeah, if you ever think that any of your ministers had any moments where they felt the call and they were going, I don't think so, I can promise you, we probably all have. In fact, this whole week has been kind of a reminder of that process as Yuki has been preparing for her ordination tonight, and just supporting her in that preparation has been giving me traumatic flashbacks to my own ordination preparation. Because you have to organize the service, you have to organize the people who are going to be a part of it, you have to organize your reception and go. Sometimes you have to deal with your niece who is just severely unhappy with how things are going at the moment. I mean, ordination preparation is one of those things, and they don't tell you this. They don't tell you this because you go through your process and you're examined and you write a paper and you answer questions and you go through all this stuff and you reach the final point when they go, congratulations, we're going to ordain you. Well, what they don't tell you, what your regional ministers and your conference ministers don't tell you is there's one more test. And that is writing, planning, organizing, and getting everybody together for your ordination service. It is like that last test to prove that you've actually been called to this. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Verdi, you and all. I can't look at you too hard because I sat on that committee and I helped you do it in Chicago. But yeah, that last step is a much longer step down than you think it ought to be. So this last week, even though she's done all the heavy lifting and I've just been trying to support her, I'm having these moments where I'm going, oh my gosh, I'm so tired, and it's her ordination. It's not even my own. But, I laugh about this. Today's text, I hear this as the cost of discipleship, and Jesus is trying to put before us an example, to give us examples of what it means to take up the call of the gospel and to follow it. And The cost of discipleship, well, ministers, we all know it's not planning your ordination service. As stressful as it was, as painful as it's continuing to be for me today, that's not what the cost of discipleship is really all about. There's more to it than that, and it runs deeper. And I think it's hard sometimes to hear Jesus' words because we've gotten used to them, haven't we? You have to disown your parents, disown your family. Heck, you have to disown yourself in your own life. We've gotten so used to hearing these words of self-sacrifice, I don't know that we always think about what they mean anymore. We don't hear that message. So I was drawn to a story I encountered in seminary about the German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Lutheran pastor and scholar. And from what writings that we have from him, brilliant pastor and a fascinating scholar. And he was serving in Germany just as Hitler was coming to power. And he took up with the confessing church as the Reich was starting to consolidate church leadership into kind of a unified national church. And too many of our sisters and our brothers were going along with this as their churches were getting swept up and pulled into this Reich's church. He went underground with others to form the confessing church. But he did this after he had his out. You all maybe heard the name Paul Tillich or Reinhold Niebuhr. They are also brilliant German pastors and scholars and theologians. They came to the United States as Hitler was rising to power. And they managed to find themselves in prestigious teaching positions at high-grade prestigious seminaries. So they came to the U.S. and they continued their work here. Maybe you've heard the name Karl Barth, another great name of the 20th century church. He was also standing in opposition to Hitler, but he was doing it from the safety of Switzerland. Now, he was working with the confessing church and supporting their efforts and their actions, but he had the mountains between him and the Nazi establishment to keep him safe. Dietrich had an opportunity. Those who had gone before him invited him to come to the United States with them. They could help him arrange travel, get his visa in order, and they were pretty sure there would be a slot opening up at one of those East Coast seminaries. He'd be able to come in, take the job, start teaching immediately, and he would be able to help them, and they could support their siblings in the faith back in Germany from afar. And Dietrich even got on the boat and he came. He came and he met and he interviewed, and he was offered the position. But he came to the realization he couldn't take it. He knew he could not carry his cross, a cross that needed to be carried in what was becoming the occupied state of Nazi Germany here in the United States. So the war had not broken out and gone into full steam. The troubles were rising. Hitler was already beginning his persecution of Jewish peoples and other so-called undesirables in the regime. Bonhoeffer got on a ship and he sailed back to Europe. Now, he wouldn't sign the confession that he was forced to sign by the state. He wouldn't become a part of the Reich's church. So he had to live in exile. He went underground and he became part of a confessing seminary that was meeting and gathering in secret. And he wrote this brilliant book. And I say that knowing I haven't read it all yet, but what I had read is brilliant. Life Together, talking about how they communed and grew and learned with one another as the church in exile in their own land, and how they continued to speak out and to preach against the excesses of Hitler and the rising Nazi machine, even to the point where Dietrich found himself needing to make a choice. See, he had connections. Thanks to Karl in Switzerland and some other connections, he could occasionally get out of the country and go into Switzerland. As a religious leader, he could kind of find a way around the system, and he could escape. And so he became a messenger, and he became a part of the movement of political and military and social leaders who felt it was necessary to end this, and who banded together and plotted to kill Adolf Hitler. He took up this call as a minister of the Christian faith. He became part of the movement that strove to kill off a man they deemed so evil that the ends might justify the means. That alone sounds like the cost of discipleship to me. having to pick up something that as a faith leader we might feel led to renounce, the act of taking another's life, but doing so seeing that this might be the most faithful and the most gospel path is to remove such an evil from the life of their nation. And in doing so, and in becoming part of the plot to kill Hitler, Bonhoeffer was ultimately exposed. And he was captured. And he went into prison. And he wrote more brilliant things from prison, his letters and papers from prison, another book of brilliant works. In fact, some of his poems have been translated into hymns, and we sing them. One of those we're going to sing tonight at Yuki's ordination service is a poem of Dietrich Bonhoeffer's set to music. I'm excited for that. He was in prison, and the war was winding down, and he was in prison, and the order for his execution kept being delayed, and it was delayed, and it was delayed, until not just days before the war would come crashing to an end, the order finally came through. And the Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who thought maybe there was a chance he might survive this, that the process might be slowed down enough that the advancing Allied armies would reach his camp, and where he was in prison, they might liberate it. And just days before that happened, the order came through, and Dietrich Bonhoeffer was hanged for his part in the plot to kill Adolf Hitler. You must be willing to turn against your family, to turn against your parents, to turn against your own life. In Bonhoeffer's case, to even turn against perhaps your own values in the name of the gospel. I'm not sure I can even begin to fathom how you process and pray through that type of a decision. But boy, if there was ever a story about the fact that commitment ain't cheap, it's his. So yeah, I like to start off the sermon by laughing, tease Verdi about the way she kept forcing me to do things, joke about ordination planning and how much of a pain in the neck it is. None of that's the cost of discipleship. That's not the commitment. The cost of our commitment, when God calls, we may find it runs much, much deeper than that. And I wish I could tell you I had answers. I wish I could tell you that Dietrich survived the war, and so he had written down the answers so we'd know them. I wish I could tell you that this sermon was going to end and we were all going to smile and be happy because we recognized the cost and we could pay it. But I can't. Sometimes the cost we may discover to follow Jesus may be beyond what we ever imagined or could fathom. And we'll have to decide if we're willing to do it. Can I hate my parents to follow Jesus? Granted, I did move halfway across the country from them, but it's not because I hate them. And if that was what it took to follow this call, I'd have an easy out because I'd have just told Jesus no. But I wonder about the cost that I might yet have to pay. I wonder about the cost that we might have to pay as individuals or as a church. I don't know what it'll be. But I know that sometimes when Jesus calls, our commitments ain't cheap. May we find the way to support each other when the call comes. May we find a way to lift each other up in prayer when we need that help. And may we stand together when the cost is levied on us all. Amen.